Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Target Jobs webinar. So today I'm very, very excited and feel very privileged to be able to host a webinar with these four incredible students and graduates in celebration of Pride Month. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about their experiences through education and then going into employment, and then at the end we're going to do a Q&A. So if you do have any questions at all for any of our panelists today, if you look down to the bottom of the screen, there will be a questions tab. If you pop your questions in there, when we get to the end of the event, we will go through some of those questions. But yeah, so what we'll do is we'll start by just introducing everybody. So I'll just introduce myself to start with. My name is Brainy and I work in the events team here at Target Jobs, which means I get to do lots of exciting things like host webinars like this. So I'll pass over to our panelists now. So Joel, do you want to start by introducing yourself first?
Sure. Hi, my name's Joel. My pronouns are he, him, and I am currently a second-year economics student at the University of Warwick, where I am the president of the Warwick LGBTQA and Allies, Warwick Professional LGBTQA and Allies Network, which is like an LGBT career society, and I'm also kind of about to start a summer internship at Boston Consulting Group.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Joel. And V?
Hi, my name's Celine Shiher. I graduated from Cambridge 2 years ago, just as the pandemic was kicking off, so that was fun. At law, now I work for the Cambridge Career Service. I do, I'm their communications coordinator, so I do marketing design, emails, a whole bunch of communications related things. But I also do producing of shows and club nights in London in my spare time and a few other bits and bobs.
Oh, that's perfect. And then Celine?
Hi, my name is Celine, and it's she, her. Sorry, I can hear my mic on my. I don't know if anyone can hear that. Sorry. My name is Celine Shiher. I graduated from Brooks last year. I'm currently the chair of media for NSP, National Student Pride. I currently work for a uni. Sorry, it's just the mic. Can you guys hear me like the?
We can hear you okay, yeah.
Okay. I can hear myself twice.
Oh, bless you.
I was gonna say, I forgot, sorry. So in my uni, I used to be the president of the LGBT Society, and I was also the officer in the union.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. And then last but not least, Zareen.
Hi everyone, I'm Zareen, pronouns she, her. I'm a future trainee solicitor for Clifford Chance. I graduated from the University of Cambridge in 2020, so also like the height of the pandemic, scary times. I currently am taking a break between my graduate diploma in law and my legal practitioner's exam. So I'm in a bit of a break currently. I also won the LGBTQ Undergraduate of the Year Award in 2020 with, of course, Target Jobs. So that was really exciting. And currently in my spare time, I host diversity, intersectionality and inclusion workshops, recently for London Met University and previously for The Economist.
No, that's perfect. Thank you, Serene. So we're going to go into a little bit kind of about you guys, a little bit more about you all. So one of the first questions that we'd like you all to kind of discuss is, how did you pick the university and your course that you went to? And did your experience of being kind of a member of the LGBTQ plus community influence what you chose to do at university? And I'll send that out to all of you, whoever would like to go first.
I can go first. So I would say, well, picking Cambridge was a little unorthodox because my school had never sent anyone to Oxbridge. So that was a bit of a trial and error journey for us all. which ended up working. But that was a little bit kind of a bumpy start, just because I didn't have many expectations. But once I got there, I found that I really enjoyed the course. The whole reason why I picked Cambridge was because of the course, Human, Social and Political Sciences, which was really fun and allowed me to, especially my third year, explore the things that I'm interested. So like kind of blackness, queerness, Black queerness, and a bunch of other things. And my experience within university, I think, was heavily shaped by my involvement with, well, being the LGBTQ officer for the African and Caribbean Society, and then later on being the president of Fuse, a society for queer people of color, and just kind of carving out that space and being able to recognize mine and a lot of people's different intersections, I thought kind of made me feel really comfortable in a place that could be quite uncomfortable. So yeah, that's kind of a brief segue into my journey.
No, that's lovely. Did anybody else have anything else that they wanted to add?
I'm happy to go next. Also Cambridge. Yeah, so I think, again, Cambridge was a bit of a, I don't know, I suppose aspirational in some ways, because none of my family had really been to university, at least not in the grad. My parents had then done some kind of post kind of study type teaching things. And my kind of schools were not known for sending to Oxbridge either. So it was definitely, I think being LGBT plus, you kind of become a bit of an overachiever, because in many ways you feel like things are already harder, so you have to work even harder yourself. And then I think that pushes you, and you think you need to achieve better as well, because I think you almost have this sense of, if I don't achieve well, then I'm just going to be like looked down upon all my life. So there's definitely a lot of pressure, which probably was a big part of the reason why I wanted to go to Cambridge. Law specifically I chose because it was quite personal to me. There was definitely an LGBT plus aspect in that, especially being trans. It was very like, I mean, I did my dissertation in third year on trans criminal law and kind of how sexual offences work if you're trans, and kind of disclosure, which was really quite interesting to me. And also because my older brother had been to prison quite a few times. So there were quite a lot of different kind of things in my life that had always been kind of present, but I never felt like I had power, agency, or understanding in. So picking law was very much kind of a personal thing for me to just understand that a bit more, and also, yeah, do something which was a bit different to what I'd done before, but really interested me. So yeah, it was definitely a lot of new experiences. And I'm not doing law now, so it wasn't exactly, I'm glad I chose the degree. I really enjoyed learning about it. I'm not sure if it's, at least presently, the career I want to pursue, but definitely don't regret it.
No, that's perfect, and thank you obviously very much for sharing that with us. Joel and Celine, was there anything kind of that made you choose the university and the course, the route that you went down?
Sorry, trying to get things to unmute. You'd think at this point in the pandemic. No, I think looking back on it, I wish I'd thought about it more. Almost like I was a very impulsive person. I've never been somebody who likes making stressful decisions. And so I did, like, with hindsight, pick Warwick a bit impulsively. But like, I think like you can kind of make your mark with that kind of stuff regardless of where you are. I wouldn't say that Warwick was particularly well known for its kind of queer community or anything like that past like pre coming to this university, but kind of like almost by like finding a community and deciding that you want to kind of make that mark, you can build that and like almost make the impression yourself. I think economics for me was about kind of like wanting, and I feel like there's probably like an element of like, because of like being LGBT, feeling like you have to take part in wanting to kind of make progress and like improve society for people and like kind of progress equality. I feel like economics was my way, or for me was like important to understand in order to be able to effectively do that, because in the end so many of the kind of ways that like oppression feeds through society end up rooting back to kind of economics and stuff.
Thank you, everyone. So mine journey is quite different from everyone. So I went to Berks. I also changed schools. So I used to do biomedical science, and then I changed to business and marketing. Literally a big jump from science to a business course. The reason I chose science was because of my parents. All my family, well, within um, my family, like my sister, my parents, we all went to uni. My dad was an engineer, my mom was a nurse. So it was like, okay, I'm gonna go to science as well because that's all I know. Until I went to Brooks, there was no particular reason why I chose Brooks. It was mainly because of the course and the city and the network that it had. It really had nothing to do with my identity as LGBT, just because I was not out at all to my family or friends. So the decision of being LGBT wasn't there at that time. I was actually still afraid being out in uni. So I would just like, go to a society event and LGBT. I would just tell my friend, oh, I just want to try. Like, I want to see what's there. I'm just curious, but I'm straight. Like, as students, like freshers, who's scared to like come out, you're like, I just want to see. I'm just curious. Coming out a year after being gay, so be a big step. Yeah, so I did change my course a year after learning like actually the course that I did in first year was actually kind of like influenced massively by my parents and school as well. I realized a lot of schools do, especially my school, massively influence you to go to science rather than like the business or creatives. So I'm one of the few in from my school, my state school, that went to creatives, went to marketing, and yeah, and then that's where I met an LGBT community in Berks. It wasn't as good as before in first year. It was predominantly, I would say, very white. There was nothing that I could fit in, and that's when kind of like that's the reason I kind of went for the elections of officer and president to just change that culture and kind of like become more open space for everyone, not just particular communities in the uni.
No, that sounds great. Thank you, Celine. That kind of moves us on to my next question. Really, I know when students, I was a student myself. Again, graduated in 2020, the same as V and Zareen. A lot of students reinvent themselves at university. As you said, it's a time that you move away from your parents and the expectations that they have of you, and it's somewhere that you can be like unapologetically exactly who you want to be as a person. Did you find when you went to university, were you kind of out before, or was that something that you felt like your university experience really gave you the confidence to be able to do and run with?
I don't mind starting on this one. No, I think prior to university, like there's a lot of people who kind of like myself included, like experience a lot of kind of bullying and like harassment and stuff in like their kind of early school years. And I think prior to coming to uni, I was out, but I wasn't very proud about it. And I remember like I took a gap year and then came to uni, and I remember kind of like having this sensation of like this is like a fresh start. Sounds really cheesy, and like I'm tired of like having to have this be something I can't be proud of. And I think literally 2 days into my flat, to be moving into my flat, made like a really bold statement about being bi in front of the entire flat. And I was just like, you know what, I'm not gonna spend these kind of next few years like not really engaging with that part of my identity. And then kind of it was kind of obviously hard because my first year was like peak pandemic. So like societies were pretty like non-existent for a lot of it. Um, and I remember as things were opening up, like um, it was that like there was a moment where I kind of just decided that like I really wanted to properly engage with the queer community at Warwick a lot more, which is kind of why I joined Plan, which is the society I do now. Um, Even though it's kind of like an LGBT career society, like at the time when I joined it, I didn't know what a CV or a cover letter was, and kind of was just there to kind of make friends. And it's been like a nice way of almost teaching me to kind of be unapologetically kind of fierce for the first time. And I think that like coming to university and almost being like a mental fresh start has been really like vital to that.
I think what Joel said about being out but not necessarily being proud is really interesting. I definitely resonate with that. I would say I'd been out since 15, 16, but it was more I had settled with the reality of it rather than I was particularly happy about it, especially because it's just not particularly congruent with my culture, religion at times, and the way that kind of the people from those communities tended to express that. That didn't often live in harmony with my sexuality. So yeah, I was out, but not particularly proud of it as well. But when I went to university, I don't think I reinvented myself, but rather it gave me the space to properly express and execute the parts of myself that I had wanted to, but I kind of had to keep constrained. They were never really under wraps, but constrained. So that was really freeing. I remember my first day looking around. I was in a room full of a bunch of freshers and people just kept saying they were queer, queer, queer. I was like, oh, okay, this is good. This is good stuff. Good start. So I kind of, and the rest of the years kind of went like that. I have a lot of queer friends. I have a lot of straight friends. And that's really nice. And it made me feel like I could be comfortable in that environment. So yeah, as things kind of progressed, I was very settled in my kind of sexuality and the parts of my identity that I previously felt didn't mesh very well. So yeah.
Just to jump back in quickly, I think there's like something I've really come to notice, like especially hearing Zareen talk there. I think what happened when I came to the transition between school and university, and there's kind of very institutional like reasons behind it, is like at school in a much smaller environment and a smaller community, the odds of you having those people that you can look up to and be like almost inspire you to be that fierce and full self, kind of is a lot harder to find. And like there's definitely like legacies of Section 28 with that too. I mean, I like for another event I was doing recently, like was having a think about it, and I realized I could not name a single queer teacher for my entire education experience, or role model anywhere in this school, throughout like primary and secondary school. And it was, whereas it was kind of the transition to uni and like the kind of increase in scale of environment, like allowed me to kind of meet those people who have pushed me to where I am now. It definitely wasn't just something that like I could have done on my own. And like there's definitely a couple of people I'm incredibly grateful for that. And it's those like role models who've got your back and who can kind of really encourage you to take pride in yourself that were so vital about the kind of university transition.
I feel like mine might be a bit longer because my journey's been a bit, I've come out more than once. Also, I remember when I got my accepted into Cambridge, my offer, I remember someone coming to me and said, oh yeah, Cambridge is like statistically the gayest uni, so you're going to be great. So yeah, no, I mean, I came out with my sexuality when I was like 13 years old. I was like the first person in my year at school. Very brave, very brave. I was like friends with all the goth kids who are like bisexual, and I was like, "Who are you, like older than me?" And I was like, even though I'm not a goth and I've never been a goth, I was very much feeling myself. But the thing, because I'm from like a rural town in Yorkshire, I know you can't really tell very well, but there was just like no queer representation in my schools, even in my hometown. It was like a few villages away, let alone any like representation for different genders. So like the first trans people I met were at university. I had some friends online who were trans because a lot of my friends were online because, like, again, I was kind of an outsider at school. But university really, yeah, gave me that experience to kind of meet people and actually get to talk to real life people about their experiences and and how it made them feel and kind of make me understand mine better, because it's not like I ever saw it positively in the media. I remember the only thing, this is such a vivid memory for me, that I remember seeing of like trans people in the media was like Thai ladyboys and all this like awful, very like interviews on Good Morning News and treating people very just otherworldly, and that I think was always kind of stuck with me and kind of made me very ashamed of who I am for a while. It definitely took me a while to kind of unpick a lot of that. And then try and get healthcare as well. There's just so many kind of stages when you're trans, at least transitioning in a medical way. to have to kind of get through, and sometimes it feels like this kind of mountain that you're never going to be able to pass. It just feels a bit overwhelming, and there were definitely times when I thought it's, I should just kind of, I'm fine as I am, and I should kind of accept that. And it's really quite sad that in order for me to be happy, it felt almost impossible. But I can say to anyone listening or whatever that I'm really glad that I took the time to learn about myself, that I made those hard decisions, that I pushed through systems that worked against me, and I'm definitely a lot happier for it.
More with me, like for me, I was much of a late bloomer, just because I came out really late. Well, I wouldn't say late. For me, it was late. I came out like probably 19, and I was in uni, first year in uni, because I took a gap year myself. Um, and my parents, I didn't know if they were accepting or not, like because we grew up Catholic, and my grandma's very religious as well. So I was like, oh my God, like I'm never gonna come out to my parents until I actually can afford to live by myself. Um, but when I went to uni, there's one particular memory I would always remember is I would never be friends with any Filipinos in my uni, just because I was so scared that once one Filipino know, everyone's gonna know in the UK for some reason, and then my parents are gonna find out. So this is why I don't have much Filipino friends. Although the friends that I made in Brooks made me really like be proud of myself and who I am. They're the one who actually pushed me. Most of them are allies, straight, because I didn't meet a lot of LGBT people until I actually started getting more involved within the LGBT community. And like I think it helps a lot, with allies as well, if they can show that they are allies, not just saying, oh yeah, I'm okay with you being gay, but like sometimes it gives a push as well. It's like, they're going with you to events, or like telling you, oh Celine, I've watched this, I don't know, some LGBT movie or series, and they're like, oh, I learned this about this community and that community. And you kind of like feel more encouraged, being like, actually I should be more proud, because if my friends who are straight and like watching or learning more about the LGBT community, I should be more proud of myself. um as well as like growing up as well, before, like two of my boy best friends only knew, um during college, and that was kind of like scary telling them as well, because they were Filipinos, and I was like, oh my God, everyone's connected, like within this small POC community, everyone's connected. In my head, I always had that fear. But growing up in, well, the next stage, which is the uni, where I started getting more involved, it became better for me. It became like when I found more people from the community, especially in the POC, I feel more connected, just because when I talk about experiences, I don't know about you, Zuri, but when you in the same community, you're just like, oh my God, you experienced that as well. I did too. And that was a big part of me. Like I think my religion, my ethnicity, and being gay is such a big part of me. Being in uni as well, because Berks is also predominantly very white, so it was very hard to connect with other students. Even though you can say, oh yeah, we're both LGBT, but at times it's like it's very different. The empowerment of when you do talk to someone from your community, it's like, oh, we can do this way or do that way, because of the differences between, like, I don't know, religion or ethnicity. Yeah, so being in uni did help me a lot to be more proud. I am now like with my parents, my family, everyone on every other side, because everyone in my family we're all Catholic. I just say to them, yeah, like girls. So there's no shame in that anymore. I'm like, you don't accept it, because most of my aunties and uncle are pastors as well. So I'm just like, yeah, yeah. And then my parents would tell them, yeah, Celine likes girls, so what? My parents would literally just say that, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm just happy that I came up at 19 now.
No, that's really really lovely to hear. That's really nice, actually, Celine. So I know you've all kind of spoke there a lot about kind of your friends and societies and things that you were involved in at university. Did any of you kind of have any support from like lecturers or careers advisors, or even like the well-being, like mental health and well-being departments at your university? Was there anything kind of within that university infrastructure that you used for support whilst you were there?
Yeah, I mean, I had one of my director of studies in my final year was a gay man who I got on with really well, which was really nice. And yeah, I think just luckily there was LGBT plus representation. It wasn't always easy. I remember when I was doing my dissertation, my supervisor made quite a few comments which made me uncomfortable, referring to cis people as normal, for example, right in front of me when my whole dissertation was literally about trans people, and just stuff like that. But luckily, I was like, I'm not going to let this defeat me. I found an academic in the university who she was gay. She was married to a woman and had done loads of research on what I was looking into about trans people. Was really respectful and really kind of helped me. And was like asking me those questions, seeing what she could do to support me further. And the people were definitely there. Sometimes you're definitely not going to find everyone is supportive or understands, especially if you go to certain universities which are more archaic, or have people who have been in position for years and kind of just aren't going to take the time to really care or learn about you. That's a kind of a sad reality, but there are people who care. My senior tutor, which is someone who kind of does a lot of the welfare stuff, was really great in getting me therapy and just being very supportive if I ever needed to talk. And also like the health services nearby me, like the sexual health services were really great at supporting me whenever even though I was LGBT plus, it was, yeah, the people are definitely there. And I think you just have to try and find those ones, ask other students as well. I think other students will have that inside view if they've been through it before, especially if they're older. Don't be afraid to ask them who you should go to and who would, support you best.
Yeah, I would say as well, I definitely had, I wouldn't say direct support from my kind of supervisors. It was just kind of there because sociology is a very queer department, incredibly so. So luckily, it was never really difficult to choose the topics that I wanted to speak about, especially in third year, mostly in third year, because that's when I specialized, because the department's so kind of open and welcoming to speaking about that. I mean, I was doing a queer and trans paper, so that was really interesting, and I could explore the things that were interesting to me. A lot of my supervisors were really supportive, but I would say as well, one person who really I've really resonated with was our chaplain at King's College. So we have a huge chapel next to us. We have, the person who's head of the chapel, the chaplain, was this gay man who hosted this really cool LGBTQ student welcome thing close to the chapel. And I just remember being just completely taken aback by how friendly the environment was, but how open to other religions it was, but not in a particularly overbearing way at all, either way. And that was really comforting and that felt really welcoming. And actually bumped into him the other day in Waterloo. So that was really nice. And I reminded him about, his impact. So I think one thing Cambridge did, I can definitely say, was that in terms of LGBTQ representation, it definitely had it. I didn't know the stat that it's like the gayest uni ever, but that does not surprise me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think slightly contrastingly, like I mean, I've had various like mental health struggles over the last year, so I've been doing a lot of like general well-being stuff, and like I've had a couple people that have been like either within the department or within the well-being process who've been really supportive, and it's been like a really open space where I've also kind of been able to explore identity things that I'd never really kind of come to terms with before this. I think but then at the same time, like I wouldn't say that my university experiences, like when I arrived, was there. Like there weren't necessarily the structures in place, and a lot of it has kind of instead been about having to challenge it to try and get to there. And I think you'll find that like a lot of the time, there are going to be some people who will have like problematic mindsets and prejudices. There are also a lot of people who are really open to it and just don't, but are just like nervous about getting things wrong. And so it's been a lot of like, we've like more recently did like a whole hour-long session with like our SU's like staff equality, diversity and inclusion committee, about like employing like LGBT, like inclusive LGBT practices. And it was like the little things, like when sat in that meeting, like everyone went around the room and introduced themselves, and I was the only person that said my pronouns. And like when we then kind of got to the point in the conversation where we started discussing that, they were all like, oh, I'm like, as soon as you said it, all the people before me were like, I wish I'd done it. And so like it's not necessarily that people don't want to but help sometimes, but sometimes somebody has to be the person that's willing to push and willing to scream and shout a bit, because like a lot of progress within the LGBT community has been through protest and through screaming and shouting rather than kind of peaceful means, and like that should be embraced, in my opinion. And like I think it's like within the society work I've been doing, I think we've like started to notice this, like there's this real common trend of like when you have a part of your identity that you're taught to like repress or like even hate, like there are deep rooted confidence impacts to that. And like that's been like something that we've been like on an individual level I've been really coming to terms with, and then also like been supporting other people through. And so sometimes the structures don't have to necessarily be from a staff or a kind of institutional point of view. Kind of those student communities are also really important to like that kind of support too.
With our uni, so when I was doing the officer and the president, the most support I had with doing that was with Helen and Kate. They were both staff. They were both gay women, and they were honestly the most amazing two people I've ever met in uni. Just because, like, when I was doing all this, I was 19, and everyone just thought I was a kid. Like, so I would say to things to people, we need to change this, we need to change that. And the senior people in our uni would just literally look at me and it's like, oh, this kid is just chatting away. And then, I would speak to Helen and Kate for like some, mental health, like, and I'd be like, probably crying. I'll be like, oh, they're not listening to me. They're just seeing me as a child because probably they're like, oh, she's only first year or second year and she's just complaining about what's happening in uni, which was an important cause because it was for the LGBT community, because it wasn't that good for the student. There wasn't a lot of events for LGBT students. There wasn't even an LGBT month for students, even though, they didn't even change the logo until me, Helen, and Kate like protest about it and being like, oh, we want the logo to change for LGBT month and that. So they were the biggest help that I've had. And they actually, with the jobs that they do, they actually help the LGBT student community a lot with this with the actual role that they do in the uni, which they are so amazing, as well as the staff LGBT as well. They improved a lot over the years, and they've helped a lot of the changes that we students wanted to do, and kind of more of like work with students and staff. And I think that's important as well if you actually have a collection of different people from different communities to work together. And when I was in uni as well, the new CEO of student union as well, she was a massive, amazing ally. And when we had a anti-trans speaker coming to our uni, she jumped on the wagon, like literally messaged everyone on their personal numbers and being like, okay, guys, we need to get this action now. This anti-trans speaker is coming back to uni. What, like, let's speak what we're gonna do. So, that kind of thing, having someone super proactive in your uni, like if they hear something before you do, is amazing if they do an action straight away. And I think that was really good thing to do for a lot of LGBT students in the uni, especially within our trans community, because it means that it just shows that yes, our uni is being stupid for inviting this anti-trans speaker again, but there are people within the uni that's like, okay, hold up, why are they coming back again? So, I think it's really important to find your allies, to find the people who can help you if things happen or if you want things to change. And what always has helped me, what things that change in our uni within the LGBT community is actually, um, creating that good relationship with people who has power in the uni and can, like, for example, our pro vice chancellor Anne Marie. She's one of the biggest allies that we had in our LGBT community, and she put her students first before even the other vice chancellor, I say. And, like, when she told us, oh, she's leaving the uni and moving to another uni, everyone particular they're really happy. We're all really happy for her, but she's been a big help to our community, just because she's always used her voice as a pro vice chancellor to progress the LGBT community, not just for students but as well as for staff.
No, that's lovely. Thank you all. It's really nice to hear as well that you all had that one person at university that you had there to support you, whether it was another member of the community or whether it was friends and things that were allies. So that is really lovely to hear. So just kind of moving on a little bit from your university experience and more into like your job search. I know, Joel, you're still very much studying, but I also know that you're also very much hardworking and already out there, kind of getting experience and everything. So you will absolutely be able to answer the questions. So do you have kind of any tips or anything that stood out in your experiences from when you were at that point in university where you had to start branching out into companies, looking for experience, looking for opportunities? Did you stay out, and did you kind of tell them that on your initial application, or did you kind of hold that bit back? Just kind of any experiences that you had with that, or any tips for any students that might be in a similar position?
I found that I definitely didn't hold back. I think I'd reached a point in my journey where this was so intrinsically part of me that it didn't make sense to hold back, because then I wasn't being even remotely close to authentic. And I think that's always a no-no if you're going into an interview kind of environment, because at the end of the day, you are trying to be a good fit for the company, but you have to make sure the company is a good fit for you, and you can't do that if you're holding back significant parts of your identity. So by then I think I'd really, it was at the forefront of who I was, especially because the experience that I thought I needed to put forward as examples of my leadership abilities, my kind of organizational abilities, revolved around my Society for Queer People of Color. So that was kind of a no-brainer for me to speak about that. And also I wanted to find out what the company's approach would be to kind of diversity, to being LGBTQ. And a good way to ask that are things like, what are your diversity networks look like? What kind of commitments do you have? What kind of pledges do you have? And, you can really tell what companies are kind of winging it, what companies do know, what are the kind of commitments and values that they have towards diversity and inclusion. So yeah, definitely didn't put anything back. If anything, it was very much on display.
That would be the same for me as well, because if you looked at my LinkedIn, I honestly, like, everyone you see it's just all LGBT or mostly
Rainbow,
LGBT
rainbow,
advocation
rainbow.
work.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't hold myself back as well. I generally can't, because, like, when I'm in an interview, I do have to talk about my advocation because most of my work are from around the LGBT community. What I did is, there's a tip that I can tell the students or graduates that's currently looking for jobs, is go to networking events specifically for LGBT communities, because companies, businesses go there, try and that's where what Zareen said is, do ask what do they do. Don't just because they're there, it doesn't mean like they do everything. What they present, you have to ask them questions. What kind of policies do they have for the LGBT communities? What work, what progress? For me is, I generally always go to the diversity and inclusion part of their website, and I'm like, okay, what they're doing, what do they do, who's the chair, what kind of, like, policies do they have currently, and it has to align within you as well, because if you do want to be authentic at work, and I know that there are students that, especially, it's different when you work in the UK to abroad, because there are students that do come back to their countries, because I do have friends as well, and international friends, that they have no choice but come back to their countries where it's more anti-LGBT, so it's much more harder for them to find companies that are LGBT friendly. I can't speak for them as I'm not working at the abroad, unfortunately, at the moment, but I do know from my friends' experience is how they do it is actually also network with those companies. I'm not sure how they do it, how they do talk to other companies on how LGBT friendly it is. But here in the UK, definitely the best thing to do is also LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn yet, do have one. um, it's a good way to connect with recruiters as well, ask about their policies and that. I mean, that's the way I'm currently, as well as myself, currently applying for jobs, and that's what I'm currently doing.
I don't have a LinkedIn, sorry. my big red flag, my confession. No, so I guess for me it's been a bit different because I got a role after university at the university, so I kind of had an idea of how LGBT friendly it was. But I was definitely open. It was actually an interesting one because I applied through the role through the university's like platform for careers, the career services platform, which you can put like your pronouns, but that doesn't necessarily. So that's the kind of information they had, and they kind of worked out the rest themselves. And then when I got into the role, I was a bit more kind of full forward, and I tried getting like pronouns and signatures, and yeah. So it's, but then I've been very open since, and it's been a positive experience. Not everyone always gets it right, but I've never had issues when anyone has got it wrong. I've had good support from management, etc. So that's been really important. But I think so that's kind of my day job, if you like. And then in terms of just in general, when I was looking at jobs and thinking about jobs, besides this one, a lot of it has come from speaking to my friends, seeing what they're doing, seeing if there's any vacancies at their place, or what they kind of think. One of my friends works at a record company, and they were telling me how like everyone's queer there. They like manage people like Arlo Parks and stuff, and it's just very kind of, I think if you look at, I'm the Parvies are like, if you like, I think if you seek other people who are LGBT who are like having a good experience in their workplace, you kind of talk to them. You find other like companies that maybe even the company is queer. There's also queer charities now, depending on the kind of role you want to do, or kind of startups. There's definitely a lot more stuff focused on that, and that kind of leads into like my other part of my kind of the work I do, which is I produce my own kind of shows and nights, and I do perform, and I do a bit of modeling as well. That was all very much based on me being an LGBT plus person. That kind of came about. I was like, I want to make a space myself. I don't want to wait for anything. I don't want to have to, sign up to anything, kind of be a token. I was like, no, I'm going to do this. And very much, I started performing at university, and then that was like a small thing. And then when I got to London, I was very like, I want to push this further. I did some events, I networked with people, I learned my craft, and I came up with an idea for my own kind of night/show, which is its own kind of niche. It's like it's called Slay Station. It's like gaming meets queerness, and it's we're having our first like club night and show this month, next month, which I'm really excited about. And just kind of like finding that niche and finding a whole new community of people, and that saying like this space doesn't exist, has been really rewarding. I've had such good feedback from people being like, I can't believe this has never been done before. Like, I feel like my parts of my identity are kind of coming together in a way I never thought they could. And it's kind of just, I think, recognizing that being queer is such a huge umbrella thing. There's so many aspects to it, and it intersects with so many things. So like, for example, one of my interests is gaming, as you might tell, and it's so interesting how them being queer puts that queer lens on it, and how you might see different things from a queer perspective. And part of the reason I like gaming is because it was a way for me to express my identity without being judged. As a kid, I could play as a female character and no one bat an eyelid, because they're all characters. They don't know. They don't give a damn. So it's very like seeing how that kind of interconnects and seeing how you can work that in. You will find that other people have those experiences, that people appreciate that there are ways that you can kind of bring that into your work. It could even be in your office life. You might start a job and you think, oh, there's a lot of queerness lacking here. I feel like I need to bring it out. There are definitely ways you can try and bring that into what you're doing. I try all the time. We started, for example, some specific newsletters for people of minority groups, and careers. And, I was really keen to be part of the LGBT plus one for that. And anything I do, I'm always trying to think, I'm thinking of the audience, how can I reach that? Or if I'm in a meeting, I'll try and speak on that behalf. And I think because it is so kind of entwined in so many things, you can really bring it into so many different roles, and it can really be such a strong asset that I think you should really push forward to employers. You say, I have this perspective that you're lacking. I'm going to help you broaden. I'm going to, I think the best employers always say hire diversely, because then you can, you have problem solvers. If you have an incredibly diverse workforce, no matter what problem comes up, someone will know what to do. And you have that skill by being LGBT plus, so definitely sell yourself with them. Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny. Despite not being a graduate, this is like my mastermind special skill subject. So I can list off facts for days about it. I think like one thing before I get lost in like whatever trail of thought my mind goes down. Like obviously, like when we're like inherent to doing a panel like this, we're all at stages where we're happy to be put on screen and be confident in ourselves. But like a lot of people aren't there yet, and that's like a really like natural like part of everyone's journey, coming in their own pace. And like I mean, statistically, it's like in 2016, like 6 in 10 graduates went back into the closet in their first job. And like still to this, like even more recent research has found that like 1 in 3 people never come out in the workplace. And so there's like all of this evidence that there's still this very institutional problem to it. And something I've learned really recently, which I think's like really like useful, particularly for people who aren't yet necessarily confident in their identity or out, is like, as a protected characteristic, you can come out in the recruitment process to HR in your interviews, talk about LGBT experiences you've had and be proud of them, and then not legally allowed to share that with the company. So you can still like come out in your own pace and still take pride if you've been a part of like an LGBT organization or a pride organization or a campaign, and talk about that in interviews without feeling like you are then like releasing yourself to the kind of big bad world. And I think that's the kind of quite a useful tool in terms of like doing the application processes. Obviously, I do an LGBT career society, and I'm a massive advocate that they should be much more of a thing. And we're in the process of working to help them set them up at other universities. So I may as well plug, please reach out if you feel like it. Because we've now launched plan organisations in Kent and Sheffield, and are in the works of doing one in Cambridge as well. And like, it's been so important, because whilst like, yes, like you can go and do your own research and look on these websites, but it can be this burden when you are from any kind of minority community, of like your job in finding doing applications becomes 10 times harder than anyone with more privilege than you, because there's just so many more things that you need to know about this company in order to feel safe in them. And like the organizations like the one I do can be really useful for almost trying to help people do that for them, by working with companies and spotlighting the good and the bad. And I mean, the reason why I've ended up kind of really pursuing the BCG route was because like through this organization, like I went to an event back in October, having no idea what consulting was, for the free alcohol, and chatted to somebody about like what they do, realized it was completely like had so much synergies with like what I like to do and like my skills, and then kind of would engage more and more. And like, I think one thing that we do in every single event we do, when you get to that point where you have to think of questions for the Q&A section, is we really like to ask, particularly in global companies, what support networks do you have in place to support LGBT employees, either who are based in or have to travel to countries, sorry, where like it's still not acceptable, and there's still so many institutional barriers and like threats to life and safety. And that's a really difficult question to answer, because there's not necessarily always like countless things that are really easy to do, but almost whether the people you're asking that to can like answer that question or feel confident in telling you at least something, is a sign that at least there's awareness of what support networks are in place. And like, I think it was somewhere along the way somebody said to me, like, it's also like, it's easy to go and work in the companies that are already there, the kind of industry leaders in LGBT equality that will really put you first. But there are also this big swathe of companies that are really trying to get there and aren't there yet. And if queer people don't go into them and push the change from within inside, we'll never make that progress. And so don't be afraid to be fearless. I think like V said, like there's statistical evidence that diversity, like I hate having to like talking about people in a monetized way, but like diversity increases profit margins because diversity of thought is incredibly useful for making progress within companies. And so you're more of an asset to them than you think. And like you can kind of take power with that. I had a really surreal moment in like one of my final round BCG interviews where I was sat with like a managing director and spent like the first 5 minutes lecturing him on LGBT statistics in the workplace. And I was like, this is such a weird dynamic we've got going on between us right now. But like by educating them and by kind of teaching people how big the problem still is and how we can make progress, you will kind of help chip down that wall one little bit at a time.
I just want to quickly add, I think it's really easy as well to think as if you come out in any way or show that you might be a bit fruity, that people are going to see as a weakness and be like, oh God, I don't want this person in my company. But it has been the complete opposite with me. The more authentic I am, the more charismatic I am. And that makes people think they can work with me more easily and be like, oh, this seems like someone who's really interesting, has good ideas, let's hire them. I mean, wouldn't you want to hire me? So yeah.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you there, V. So, somebody's asked a question in the chat. So, David has asked about green flags and red flags to look for in a company when applying for roles. So, what would you say that your top green flag and top red flag would be when kind of investigating companies that you may want to apply for a role for? I'll go to Celine first.
I generally think, because I always look at the websites first, and especially if they don't have the diversity inclusion like link, like most of the companies that I apply to now does have that. If they don't have that, I do question why they don't have that. Because obviously I think a lot of, especially Gen Zs, they're more into diversity inclusion, and they're looking at that on how, it's not just us giving them what we can give them, what they can give us as well. And I think a lot of people from Gen Z does matter, like it matters to us, like also matters to us the transparency. And if they're not transparent to you guys, I think that's one of the massive red flags, is if they can't tell you or why or the reason they don't have it. Just in my opinion anyway, I would not apply to that company. But the biggest green flag for me is they can fully explain to you, even during a networking event. You go to a company or a business and you ask about any work experience or anything like that, and if they straight up tell you, oh, we have this kind of work experience, or for LGBT students or BAME students, POC students, it's like, okay, let me go to this work experience. And because I feel like they do a lot of so much research into it, and like I think that's one of the big things as well, like how did they even come up with the idea of doing this kind of work experience for students within different communities.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'd agree with what Celine has said. For myself, I think top green flag is when a company has kind of diversity stream events and they invite you to them, even if you're kind of not part of the company as of yet. Maybe you're kind of still scouting for jobs. So I mean, I think corporate spaces are particularly good at this, I've found. So kind of because I used to look at consulting jobs as well, but legal in the legal industry as well, kind of like LGBTQ events, BME events, overlapping kind of disabilities, etc., and inviting potential graduates to those events is really nice, because you get people who are from those communities, who are at the company, who often drink who often speak candidly, especially when they've had something to drink, which is really nice. It's just a positive side effect, in my opinion. So that's really helpful. I found. I think a red flag for me is kind of similar to Celine, when there's kind of an obvious absence of a kind of deliberate thought about their diversity and inclusion strategy, particularly if they see diversity and inclusion as this kind of singular thing they can pursue in one-shot events. And then I know you only said one, but I think for me, that one thing that's particularly significant is when companies can't articulate what they did during the kind of when George Floyd was murdered, and during that time where there were a lot of BLM protests, because in my opinion, especially with the corporate world, everyone was speaking about it, everyone was thinking about it. So if you don't have particularly cogent things to say, or you didn't do particularly cogent things to support your Black employees with different intersections, then that's a huge red flag for me, because there should be something. So yeah.
Yeah, kind of just going off that as well. I think it's this idea that companies are showing that they're engaging more meaningfully in like things that are happening right now and how that might be impacting their employees in various different ways through the media, etc. I think for me, for both the red and green flag, it's about kind of how much pride you get from people in the initiatives they have. Is someone actively saying, "Oh yes, we've just put this healthcare into our constitution. We just made this big change." Actually showing that this is stuff that people are fighting for and caring about in the company, and change is happening. Or is it just kind of oh, there's an LGBT network. Okay, that's just like a thing that's kind of been done because it has to be done. I think you want to see how much that they're actually pushing for, and actually it's in the forefront of their minds.
I think my biggest green flag would be not just like having a web page with statistics or publishing a diversity and inclusion report, but actively setting targets for change. I think like for like BCG, for example, have a target. I can't remember what the exact target is, but there's like a quota target for 2025 for a percentage of LGBT representation in senior executive. And it's like when it's not just recognizing that things need to change, but telling you exactly how so that it's measurable rather than it just be about giving a like welcoming vibe and an inclusive vibe. My biggest red flag would be honestly like either at careers fairs or in panel events, like you can like fairly quickly make a judgment about whether anyone in the thought process along the way has considered representation in that panel or in that stand by just saying like, have they actually taken the time to think, let's make this representative, let's make the voices representative for the people we're trying to attract. And that's not just an LGBT perspective, that's for like people of color and for gender and for disability. Like there's so much intersectionality in like the oppression of all these different groups that like I don't think it's about just trying to tick one box. Like whereas a company that's really putting that effort in to make sure that they are making sure everyone doesn't just feel like included but they belong, I think that would be kind of the biggest green versus red flag switch.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Hopefully students will kind of take that on board and go forward. And if we do have any companies kind of tuned in and you kind of resonate with any of those red flags, then now's your chance. So we've got another question here from two students, and they're both quite similar, but with different kind of context. So we've got a student here, Simon. Half of one side of his family is really kind of accepting, but he identifies as both being trans and gay. So the student has said, if you have got any advice, because their mother's side say being gay is wrong and it makes them feel self-conscious. Do you have any kind of advice for that when maybe one group of people are really accepting of your identity and another group aren't necessarily as accepting? How do you kind of manage those two different sets of expectations?
I can kick it off. So I can definitely appreciate how difficult a situation that is. That's kind of a constant tension that I'm sure must be present in that environment. And I've definitely felt that at times. I think for me, what was really important when being faced with, this part of you, this huge part of you is wrong and shouldn't be something that you embrace, was taking myself away from those criticisms and thinking about it, trying to think about it as much as possible away from those perspectives. So being able to kind of reflect on how do I feel? Do I feel wrong? No, I don't. Am I surrounded by people like my friends who say that I'm wrong? No, I'm not. So I think being able to decenter those really hurtful, really harmful perspectives and lean into perspectives that are welcoming and open and make you feel like a whole entire person is really important and really helpful. It's a slow journey, but I think it's one that needs to be conducted with a lot of patience for yourself and a lot of gentleness and kindness. And that has to be at the heart of it. You can't kind of beat yourself into submission with inclusivity and things like that. So yeah, I think that's where I'd start from.
And then we've got another student question coming in, which is similar but different. Do you have any advice on how to come out to friends and family back home? They've realised this year at university that they are bisexual, and whilst they're very much out and proud at university, they aren't at home. Does anybody have any advice on how to deal with that situation?
Sorry, I'll just be quick. I think it's like at a certain point you come to terms with the like difficulty of the fact that as LGBT people you spend your entire life coming out. Like it doesn't just happen once. It will and it can happen in the smallest ways, whether that be like at work referring to like your partner as your boyfriend if you were gay, for example, and that's always going to be a challenge. I know, like, despite having like incredibly like supportive family and parents and stuff like that, who'd never kind of given me the kind of idea that they would be anything other than supportive, like I still didn't come out to my dad till I was 18, even though I was out with all of my friends since I was like 13, 14. And like sometimes there can just be mental blocks and barriers there. And whilst it's really important to kind of be your full, everyone always says your full authentic self, it like there's no rush. Like it's like protect yourself in the journey you're kind of going through. And like yes, it would be lovely to like have your family be a part of that journey, but don't feel like it has to happen overnight. Don't feel like you have to come out immediately, because like it can, like labels can be a really difficult thing. And like often, like for some people putting a label in it can give you a lot of confidence, and some people it can put a lot of pressure. And it's okay to kind of almost take the time to like learn and understand and grow with yourself before you bring other people into that journey.
Yeah, I totally agree with that with Joel. My biggest advice for you is start with your friends, your closest friends, the one that you trust the most, just because friends can come and go, but families can't. And I learned that from one of my mentors, and she told me that, do it with your friends first, because friends come and go, but family, they don't, they stay, especially your parents. um, Biggest next step is, if you do have siblings or cousins, which are your relatives, tell them next, the closest one, the one that you can trust the most. um, and then test the water, always test the water before on how confident you are. As Joel said, don't rush. Generally, don't rush for to coming out. There's no rush at all. It can take you 2 years, 3 years, 1 week even. um, just reflect on it. Ask yourself, am I comfortable? Am I ready? Am I ready with any consequence that I can think about that can happen after coming out? If you can, and if you're ready, if you're not even 100%, it's 110% ready, then you can start coming out to your family next. But I would definitely say, like, start with your friends first, and then with your family.
I would also add, I think I'm kind of mostly echoing what Celine and Joel have said, but I saw this tweet. I remember being on Tumblr a lot when I was younger, and there was this like kind of like National Coming Out Day was this huge thing. You had to come out, National Coming Out Day, and I remember every year that passed, I was like, "Oh, time's ticking," and it was just this huge pressure. But I saw this tweet, and it was like, instead of thinking about coming out as coming out, we should think about it as letting people in. Like, this is a huge part of your, well, it may be a huge part of your identity, it might not be, but this is something that is important to you, evidently. And I think sometimes we feel the pressure to disclose that, you know, we aren't fully ourselves if we don't let this as many people know as possible. And, you know, definitely if you're ready and you're ready to come out, that's absolutely fine. But I think just changing the mindset on it, as in, I'm letting people who I'm deciding who deserves to know this important and really significant part of me. So I think a mindset shift is useful, at least in these particular processes.
I also just I want to talk a bit about like safety and kind of coming out as well. And if you are worried about kind of any consequences of coming out leading you to an unsafe space, whether that's kind of feel like mentally or through the environment you're currently in being, you know, just not good for you, then I think it's a good idea to have, you know, just let some friends know, if that's whether they can give you some emotional support, maybe by calling you afterwards, or even if they have somewhere you could stay just whilst you need people to process it if you are living in a space together. I think there's, you know, you don't, I think it's often we feel like we have to do it kind of in person and all this and everything of it, but whatever feels correct for you, if you need to do it over a phone call whilst you're somewhere where you know that you'll have a support network around you, that's so fair. And, you know, you have to do it on your terms, and you have to do what's right for you. And I do think, you know, there are obviously the benefits to being able to be out and not have to kind of hide parts of yourself, but at the same time, you know, that takes as long as you need, whatever steps you need. There's no right or wrong way, and it's okay to kind of talk about that, and all the kind of messiness and intricacies, and that doesn't just go to coming out. That comes to every part of being queer, all the shame, all the things that are kind of novel and we don't learn about in school or, you know, the general world. I just recommend talking, working through those feelings with other people, and doing what's best for you.
And just to jump in quickly, not necessarily controversially, but like I have like, I think particularly within the LGBT community, like, yes, like for some people family is blood, but I think particularly for the LGBT community, you often find a chosen family too. And like for me, family are the people that are there and have your back regardless and will always be there. And like if you do have like family of blood that aren't there, like at a certain point it is okay to kind of turn around and go, you know what, I have to look after myself and protect myself first. And if that means kind of even at the extremes of like having to have people leave your life, like I'm just a really strong believer that like your chosen family is much more important to you than anything else. Um like I think like some of my friends are like some of my closest family in my heart, because they are the people that I know regardless that will always be there for me. And like you have to be able to protect yourself and surround yourself with a community that really does unapologetically let you live your life as yourself, rather than feeling like you're having to hold back to protect other people because you have to put yourself and your own welfare first.
Just to do sorry, not to create like some kind of discussion here, but just to like a reply to that, I just want to highlight that whilst I see, I agree with what of Joel is saying. I do worry that sometimes this word chosen family makes people think that this can be like a full replacement, or that these people are expected to be exactly the same, when family dynamics are really complicated. Obviously, these people, you know, have seen you from a young age, raised you, and there's a lot of cultural and, you know, other things that blend into that probably isn't going to happen with a chosen family, which in many ways is really good. But don't feel like you know, that complications, if chosen family isn't the right word for you, I do think it's so important to have that network of those people who understand you and are due to that. But at the same time, it's a tricky one, and it's okay if it's not, if those terms don't fit exactly, or if like you still need the element of blood family, even if it's difficult. You know, I think you've got to find what works for you.
No, that's lovely. Thank you, guys. And I think that's a really important note to kind of end on today. So we kind of have come to a close of the webinar. I think we've discussed some really important and meaningful topics for the students, so hopefully everybody that tuned in has got a lot out of it. You will all receive a recording afterwards, so if you do want to go back to listen to the advice again, you absolutely can. Obviously this webinar has been hosted by Target Jobs. If you want any more kind of careers advice or anything like that, do go to targetjobs.co.uk. We also have lots of articles. We've got lots of articles on there as well, kind of about being LGBTQ plus and going into the workforce or navigating your way around university. And another little shameless plug of when it comes to September, we will be doing the Undergraduate of the Year Awards again. Obviously, we've got Celine and Joel with us, who are both Undergraduate of the Year alumni, and we will have the LGBTQ plus award again. So that's my shameless plug. But yeah, thank you all very, very much for joining us and taking the time out of your day. Thank you to the four of you again for joining us, taking that time out of your workday to join us to speak to the students. We really, really appreciate it. We wish you all the best with whatever you choose to do with the rest of your week, and take care. Bye.